Welcome back to another episode of Printavo, Print Hustlers Podcast. I'm your host, Bruce from Printavo. Our co-host is out and about. He is shipping, trying to make orders for the holidays. But we've got a very special guest, Blue Grimes from Out of the Blue Screen Printing out of Denver, Colorado, my second favorite state.
Thanks
But
for having me, Bruce.
yeah, thanks so much for being able to join me. Um, we were just emailing back and forth, and you were just talking about so many cool things that I said, hey, we have got to get you on the show. But before we hop into all those details, how have you just been?
Good, good. We've been well. We're doing a lot of adjusting and blowing up and rebuilding and pivoting, and it's been interesting, but we're still here to talk about it, so that's great.
I mean, with all of those changes, how do you feel as a business owner? Just like as a owner, as a person, just the having to write everything, deal with everything.
Obviously, it's really frustrating, but on the tail end, I'm really excited about it. It's all driven by passion, which all of us share, right? That's the underlying tone, is the excitement and the energy that comes with restructuring and rebuilding um, and reworking workflows and process and testing it out, and then sometimes failing, but sometimes being uber successful. So it's fun. It's just excitement. I feel excited about it.
That's awesome. Do you think that shifted at some point? Because it seems like, at least I personally, I feel like the first, uh, the April, March, May, June was very strange and shaky and unknown, and then for sure shifted towards, oh wow, we can actually use this as a huge opportunity going forward into the rest of the year. I mean, what were those shifts like for you guys?
I agree with that 100%. We at first, we scrambled just like everybody else. I remember, I think it was the second week in March, and we had our Monday morning. We called it our strategic alliance meeting, and or that was our Monday morning management meeting, and we were talking about how well January and February went. We were forecasted to exceed our revenue goal for this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then Wednesday we had our strategic alliance meeting, and uh, I think that was at 10 a.m. And by from 8 to 10, 50% of our business had backed out, and that was booked business. And then by the following Thursday, 80% had backed out. So we were just scrambling. We were kind of deer in the headlights, I think, and really didn't know what to do. Our culture has been, but was before then, very customer service driven. Unfortunately, we were kind of order takers, um,
Mm-hmm.
and that had to change, and it had to fast. We had to go. We had to get on offense and start working down the field and scoring some touchdowns. And it was super intimidating and very stressful. We continue to lose sleep over it, but not as bad as it was. In April, I came down with shingles.
What?
Yeah, I'm not a super old guy. I just started noticing it, and I had a video call with the doctor, and he said, "You have shingles. Are you having a lot of stress in your life right now?" And I said, "Yeah. I mean, you have no idea." We started jumping on a lot of just absorbing a lot of content that you guys were putting out, that other some consulting companies were putting out, that were industry specific. We started to look at non-industry specific things that were happening. We were just trying to absorb as much information as possible, so that we really didn't have to reinvent the wheel. So everyone was going through this, so
Sure.
uh,
Wait, Blue, you mentioned a couple things. I just want to quickly go back to. The first thing was his Monday morning meetings. I see some shops do it, some shops don't. You said it was a management meeting. What is that? What's the goal of those?
we've kind of restructured since then, but that was I would drive that meeting. We did not have a director of operations at that point,
Mm,
so I would drive it. It honestly, Bruce, it was, I would call it, now looking back in hindsight, right? I would call it a micromanagement meeting. We'd go through Printavo. The inside sales reps would report on statuses, even though their notes were fairly well documented.
Hmm.
We'd stack rank quotes and leads by revenue potential, and then we'd cook through that list and
And
get
just
up.
follow up and
Mhm.
see
And
what's up.
then
Wow, how do we get them to close?
exactly, and then I would be there for from a support piece. It was, I think, disguised a way to disguise micromanagement. Um, that's one of my biggest faults. You know, this is our 16th year in business, and once I brought in our director of operations, then I had another set of eyes and ears, and not only was he able to justify a lot of things that I was, or confirm and give input on a lot of things that I was seeing, but I thought, well, maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe this isn't
Well,
a big,
when did you bring him on? That was this year.
that was in August.
Okay, that was in
In
August, and that
August.
that was that's an interesting role because I know Steven actually did something recently, the exact same thing. Was that pushed because you were just so overflown with? I mean, you talk about delegating as a hard thing to do. I think it's hard for every single person because it's always changing too, right? It's like your new
Yeah.
role has stuff that you need to delegate off to that's different that you're not used to and so on. But
Mhm.
what pushed you to bring on that person?
You kind of hinted at it. Just the need to have that an objective viewpoint, I guess. Somebody he had no industry background. He was a police officer,
Hmm.
um, and he came in and was able to just start, you know, pulling the curtains back and looking at workflow and process, and then providing the accountability piece, or questioning that. So, you know, we took a look at the org chart, and then everybody's job description. When we coach our staff, we coach based on their job description, and we find where they're meeting, exceeding those goals, or, you know, performing up to expectations, or where they're falling short, and then we coach on that. And he was able to really dig in and say, well, you know, you've got these people at these positions, um, you know, specifically in some management positions, and they're not managing staff. they're they should be. They have staff to manage, but they're not, in a traditional sense. They're not managing. The biggest reason, you know, you guys are big Michalowicz fans, I'm sure, Mike Michalowicz, but
Hmm.
he talks about, you know, what's called designers and delegators and deciders and doers. And I thought I was, you know, a designer and a delegator, but really I was a decider 100%. So, and what that is for folks that don't know, according to Mike Michalowicz, people constantly reporting. So someone's knocking on your door every 5 minutes saying, okay, I did this, what's next? Or did I do this right? Did I do this right? And that's kind of what that management meeting was, honestly, is, hey, did you remember to do this? I didn't see this in the notes. Did you do this? Did you do this? Whereas Dave is our director of operations, came in and said, well, shouldn't that's their job description. Shouldn't they just do that job? Uh,
Sure.
why do you have to continually check in and follow up and say, is this getting done? Is this getting done? Hire the right people and make sure that stuff just gets done. We've always had a great staff here. Culture, culture up until, you know, around the middle of 2019 was amazing. Really strong culture. We tried to hire and fire based on culture as well, and coach.
Wait, Blue, real quick, because I want to jump into that too. But it sounds like
Mhm.
this director of ops role, they're like director of operations of the whole business too, not just production.
That's right.
Got it. So really process start to finish. How many people was at out of the blue when you brought on this role? And also, would you have brought that person on at an earlier date, now knowing what you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had 6 people. We had 5 full-time people, and then we brought Dave on board. In November of 2019, we had 16 people, and I really dove into the numbers in the middle of in November of 2019, and we just weren't profitable. And so I looked and uh, really checked into our gross margin. Our target's 60%, and we were just falling way short. Our overhead was just way too high, and it boiled down to labor. So we had to streamline, become a lot more efficient, um, and kind of look at the workflow, um, and unload some of that onto existing staff that other people were taking on. So we started to make those cuts, and we cut back about 50%. We cut back to 8 or 9 people uh, by the very first week in
Hmm.
January of this year.
Wow.
Um, and
How was that? That feels like a tough situation.
it was really tough. We had several people that had been on board for, I think, the least amount of time was a year and a half, and the most I think was 4 years. We had to let them go. We did a severance. We offered them a severance package. We paid out all their vacation, obviously, that if they had accrued any vacation, and then we encouraged them to file for unemployment. Um, and we also backed them up, provided them references if they needed references moving forward.
Hmm.
Um, and then we started to kind of get in, and really the trajectory, net profit trajectory just kind of started to skyrocket um, immediately following that. And then
What were you? Are you able to share what were you targeting as far as a percentage?
our target, at that point in time, was really vague. We had a 60% gross margin target, but my numbers were so backwards, having over all that overhead, that I wasn't able to really drill down on a net profit target until I got my ducks in a row and looked at the final P&L for 2019, and we were in the negative on the net profit side about 5%. I set a tentative goal of 20%. But since then, we've restructured all of our pricing. I break out our hourly or our annual net, uh, based on total overhead to an hourly figure. And then we measure and track I should say, I measure and track everything. That's kind of my role in the company now. Um, and so I'm able to feed that information into a spreadsheet and build pricing around that.
Interesting. So you take all of your so yeah, walk me through that because that's always such a tough piece for every
Yeah.
shop. So you're taking all of your costs for the business,
Hmm.
everything with this new team, the smaller team,
Yep.
and putting that as in one bucket, and then where do you go from there?
Exactly right. So the way I did it, honestly, is I took our P&L from
Hmm.
2019, and then I really dove into it, and I built a lot of reports based on that about where we should have been pricing wise. Um, and then I kind of threw that out the window, and took the current P&L, and I had to forecast because we didn't really know yet what our we couldn't drill down 100% on our overhead because we had restructured so much. So we just had to forecast. So I took that data and I think I only took like a couple months, and then I just extrapolated that over a year, right? Um, and then got that down to what we would need in gross margin. And once you have the gross margin number, then you can back that out to an hourly figure. But you also have to know how productive your staff is, right? So when I initially built that, I was very lenient, and I padded that a lot. So I based that on 2 project teams being 100% productive for 6 hours a day. So that gave,
As in saying, I know how much this team can print, save per hour.
yep.
How do you balance that out though with average job, or did you just take a rough average job size and that because there's could be a big job that's totally different numbers that you would throw into that formula versus a bunch of smaller jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. So uh, I built a spreadsheet around it, and we've always, not always, but for the past about 3 years, we've measured our numbers. So we use M&R equipment, autos, and the production staff. It's task driven through Printavo actually, but they need to report their production times. Um, and once an order is complete, and then I dump that into a spreadsheet to track against our forecasted times. And our forecasted times are based on that historical data of what they've run in the past. So M&R equipment, basically there's two ways you can run it. You can run it in revolver mode where everything gets hit twice, it goes around the press twice, or in non-revolver mode where it goes around one time. And then based on total order volume, we can figure out how many pieces per hour we can print based on if that's going to be a light print on a dark garment, or a dark print on a light garment. But we have variables that we cross reference really easily. We've systematized it so that anybody can come in and sell it and learn how to pull from the correct price list to quote it. So our price lists are there's a lot of data and information that back them up, but they break out pretty simple for an anticipation of having a sales team use them in the field.
Sure. What did that result in? I mean, did you see? I'm guessing prices went up.
Yeah,
Uh,
they did. They did. It wasn't significant because we had made so many cuts, right?
okay.
So our gross margin, well, I guess you could call that, what do we need to operate the business and keep the lights on and pay everybody, once you back out the substrate cost. That's the number that I had to find, and that's pretty easy when you look at your P&L and just pull those numbers out, assuming that you have a P&L and that you're tracking that. And once you have that gross margin, your break even point, right? Then you can back that out. As long as you know you've measured, and you can get your finger on the pulse of how productive your team is or your teams, then you can back that out hourly. So as I was saying, so we were running two teams at that time on two autos, and assuming that we're running both presses, we were getting 12 hours a day, 6 hours per team, out of that production. So, if we needed to make, I don't know, if our overhead was $1,200 a day, then we know that each team needs to do $100 an hour in gross revenue, in gross margin, um, to break even. And
Got
then
it.
once you have that number, you can say, okay, well, so our net profit goal now is 20%. So then I can beef that up 20, and I know as long as I'm booked to capacity, then I'm good. Who's ever booked to capacity, right? That's best case scenario. So that's another reason why I kind of said, realistically, over these past 3 years, we average about 6 hours a day of productivity, over time, from each team. Even though they're here 8 hours and we pay them for 8 hours, but
Sure.
that doesn't
So
mean
that's roughly like it's three-fourths
that.
productivity, call it, out of the full,
Yep,
or
that's a great
capacity, you can call it.
great way to look at it. But yeah, that's, if I was going to help another owner with that, I would say let's figure out what it costs to operate your business. Um,
What was did you accomplish with the changes in team, the changes in pricing? First of all, when you actually, I have two questions now that popped in my head on this. One is when you upped the pricing, you mentioned you upped it a little bit. Was there any change in how customers perceive that, or what they said, or how did that go?
no, well, that's not true. I mean, we did get pushback, right? From our repeat business is in the 90th percentile, so we rely really heavily on our repeat business, or we absolutely have in the past, to continue to grow and scale the company. That being said, a lot of those folks they're placing a repeat orders across the board. For many of them, we grandfathered them in for that first repeat order. We gave them a heads up that, hey,
Okay,
so
prices are going up.
yeah, we've had which
What happened on
timing
the
was
second
fine.
order? They just.
Um, then we would increase it.
But
Um,
did you see anybody leave? What did you know?
um, Honestly, the folks that we may have lost were not, an ideal fit anyway.
Hmm. How
Smaller.
so? Just like time wise, or smaller orders, or
Absolutely. The when I restructured that pricing and put it into Printavo, and we started to use that model, and we price now 100% using Printavo, and then we pull from pull from the catalogs. When we did that, our pricing on our core competencies, which is the higher volume, easy to print, potential for repeat, and we have
Sure.
variables for that too. The pricing on our golden egg orders went down. It actually went down, and the pricing on, we took our minimums to from a dozen to 36 pieces, and the pricing on those 36 piece orders almost doubled.
Mm.
It was kind of forced our team that's highly customer service driven to turn away a lot of or to refer a lot of business away, and a lot of repeat business. But the fact was, if and it, what and what I had to illustrate to the team many times was that we weren't profitable, and
You're
that
just
was
spinning your wheels.
another big reason why we were financing the small orders with the larger orders. We started the clone the best, dump the rest. I think Mike talks about that too, McAllowitz, or Don Miller maybe,
Sure.
but we started that whole philosophy too, and we had it mapped out pretty well. We were on a good trajectory, and then this pandemic hit, and we had to shift gears and make a lot of changes, and we're still like kind of smack in the middle of that. With bringing on a director, we reworked our goals for next year. We built a new org chart. We have several hires that we need to make.
Do you feel that with your team before, it sounded like you created proper departments and roles and responsibilities and things that you're supposed to be doing, or people you directly manage, and then held them accountable for that. I mean, is that right, or am I?
No, you're
Uh,
absolutely right. Except for the last part, is I did not hold anyone accountable.
got it.
We were order takers, and we were so busy.
Hmm.
That, I
That you're
I
just so focused on today and getting through and
Mhm.
getting the jobs out.
Yeah.
It's interesting. How do you think you have shifted as an owner to now be able to try to hold like it's not an overnight thing, right? I mean, people's behaviors and changes and habits take a while to to move from one to the other. But like, how did you make that shift? Because that's a big shift from being an operator to an owner.
Mhm.
That's not easy. I mean, it's the exact same thing as a delegation thing.
It's tough for me to make that shift because, you know, having built the company and you know printed like however many other thousand shop owners, started in their basement or whatever, and then moved out and leased space. And so you've done it all, and you've been in there and done that. And when you start to offload that and bring in resources to ideally to manage and take on that workload, it's hard to let a lot of that go. And you touched on that. Absolutely. The delegation piece is very hard. Unfortunately, it's also very addictive, right? I thought I was a great delegator in my mind because I delegated so much that made me a great delegator, right? Um, but the biggest piece in delegation is to oversee that and check back in and make sure that you're training and coaching so that whoever you're delegating the work to can be successful and grow as well.
If you were to coach somebody else and say, okay, hey, you've got to make this shift, you have to hold them accountable. What does that exactly mean, though? Right? Like from a detailed perspective, is it okay? Here's a number, a sales quota, for example, or a quota of jobs you have to be printing every day, or and if you don't, then we X Y Z. I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So that's that hasn't existed in our company before. It's not really even been a slap on the wrist. It's been a verbal, all right, guys, we got to work on this. We got to get this going again. It's hard especially if you have an objective viewpoint and haven't worked in our industry or specifically in our company before, to see, from 2018 to 2019, we more than doubled our revenue. Um, and we were so busy that a lot of this stuff was just missed. Several things were dismissed. We weren't coaching as often as we should have been. The last thing I want to do is try to make excuses for myself, but I was kind of just running around with a big roll of duct tape trying to tape everything together, to get it to stay, to keep working, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we're trying to drive an 81 Chevette about 120 miles an hour. Steering wheel is starting to shake and everything else.
Yeah.
So um, that's kind of where I was at, and my way of handling that was let's bring in additional resources, and put them in these specific roles, but and then let's move existing resources into a management position, and they can manage that person. We still have a coaching company that we use, so we our management roles we put into some coaching, um, but we were so busy producing work that wasn't profitable. Um, but we didn't know that at the time. We just thought, this is great, man. The phone's ringing off the hook. We didn't have to go attack anything. All we had to do is do what we do best, and that's produce an excellent, timely product at a fair
Sure.
price, and then retain that customer. We've always been great at that. It's hard to find other businesses that have been able to grow and scale as much as we have, that have never picked up the phone and made a sales call. And that says a lot about our customer service and the buying experience and the experience of doing business with our company.
You talked about that actually going from defense to offense. It was that from a sales and marketing perspective, or was that just from the management side?
That trickled down from me. That would be the blessing in disguise, if there were such a thing, for this whole pandemic, is that it's forced us to do that, right? And say, well, we can't sit around and wait for the phone to ring. It's always been in my back pocket, and I've always wanted to grow the outside presence, that the outside sales force, and then I'll find excuses or reasons not to. Well, look, dude, we're gonna do close to 2 million this year. Why? And we're slammed with work. Why do I need to bring in an outside force right now, if we're struggling to hold this together? And then, like I said earlier, at the end of last year, when I dug in and looked, I said, well, we're not even profitable. What's the point? Um, and so we just kind of blew it up, and started from the ground up, from okay, what's our cost now that we're streamlined and efficient? What's our overhead look like? Where do we need to price to make a 20% net profit? Let's roll it out, and and that's how we'll sell, until we have an outside force uh, that can be proactive and go, ping our existing client base for referrals and new business, but also drive their own book of business that they come to the company with, and expand and build. Um,
Is that part of the hiring that you want to do, or
mhm.
or is there other roles that you wanted to bring onto the company?
There's a couple of other roles. We're still shifting some pieces around too. We're in the process, honestly, of figuring out if we have the right people now to build, if we have the right foundation and structure to build on top of now. And we've made some decisions. We're not ready to execute yet. Um, right now, the main focus is to build out the sales team. So we've got a business development manager we hired, and he's transitioning in. So he's working part time until the middle of January, and then he'll be full time the middle of January. And we're building a sales team around him, uh, that will consist of, ultimately, it will consist of several outside reps, but uh, initially it'll be one outside rep, and then we're calling it an account coordinator. The account coordinator will be his right hand person, his eyes and ears in the office, and in front of a computer at all times, right? Kind of his high level assistant. And that account coordinator and our business development manager will start on the same day.
Got it. So
And,
that's a pretty big shift into
mm-hmm,
diving into, but you guys are forcing it. I'm curious. There's a big. We talked about change with the team and change with the company and just so much around that. Has there been people, a part of the team, that it's been hard to help them shift, or that it didn't necessarily maybe work out with, or Because I hear that a lot is just I can't get my team to embrace change, like positive change, and I
Yeah.
and I, you know, part of me is just like, well, they're just not supposed to be part of your team anymore. But I do understand that hiring just takes a lot of time to find good people as well, and so you kind of just let things float.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then again, I think that's kind of the blessing in disguise with COVID and this pandemic is that it's forced us to do that, right? So we can't be complacent anymore and say, well, boy, that's a nice to have, but it's not a need to have right now. So let's just sit on it and cross our fingers and hope that this stuff starts to work out. But we have to encourage and promote change, and we have to plan and execute this stuff, or we're not going to survive it. We did have a lot of legacy staff. You know, minimum 3 years on the team, and some of those people that we had to let go was really hard. Um, One of them more recently was extremely hard because um, the culture piece was there, man, 100%. Great attitude, hard worker, um, really enjoyed being here, but wasn't able to scale with the company and shift gears so that we were focusing on our core competencies, like I say, our best customers and our best prospects. It was really hard for that individual to to turn away any opportunity. This was in like an inside sales type position, so customer service, so answering the phone, providing quotes and things like that. But it was so hard to get that point across that look, let's look at your numbers for the past month. You've got a $20,000 order here that took you from lead to close, took you a day to work that order. And then you got an order here for 36 pieces that took you a day to work from lead to quote because you brought them in. We sat down, we looked at samples, we did everything else. So, what's the most efficient and effective use of your time? And the only way I could really think to make that click was to say, well, let's look at the commission because we paid commission to inside sales too, which I would not recommend doing that. But
How would you have done the commission
commission 100% on new
on the outside? But
net new business, land and expand business. So that someone has to go out and grab that account,
hmm,
not someone that calls in and says, I need 500 t-shirts. But we paid a commission on that plus a great base. But we sat down and looked at those reports too and said, look, so, you made $10 on this order and you made $500 on this order and they took you the same amount of time. And while the culture and the attitude and the work ethic was absolutely there, um, understanding that piece, we just couldn't, we were pulling them through and
sure,
they couldn't get that. Same with some stuff with workflow, right? Where we've adjusted our workflow and built new systems and processes around that to support that. And it's all geared towards being profitable. So we're focusing on business that's profitable for the company. Um, and that's a lot of that boils down to using your time efficiently, especially if you're one person and you have one role and you only have so many hours in the day. Um, let's streamline some of this stuff. Let's use Printavo to price everything, right? Let's use the automation in Printavo. Let's use our available resources and tools that we have available to us to be more efficient and more successful in our own individual roles. And I still have people that want to sit down with a calculator and they're like, well, I want to make sure that we're gonna be in the black on this order. Like, it's fine, it's taken care of. We wouldn't have pushed this through our ERP if it wasn't the Bible, right? It's you just have to trust that that's all. That's my job in the company is to make sure that those numbers are set so that your job quoting an order is streamlined, efficient, and correct,
yeah.
and then we'll be
Um,
profitable.
that's awesome. It sounds like you've got an incredible plan, especially going into next year now, of just being able to execute, your new real management style, order workflow, start building out that outside sales team. I mean, you've definitely got your hands full.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'd push back on my director of operations and say he's got his hands full.
Yeah, fair. Good point. Good point. Guys, if you haven't read a couple of these books, Clockwork is one of them from Mike McCallowitz that Blue mentioned. There's also Traction, which kind of helps set up a lot of KPIs and execute there. Anything Mike McCallowitz, of course, is great that Blue mentioned here too. He just released a new book, Fix This Next, which I'm personally going through. So we'll be able to chat with that on there too. But Blue, thanks so much for being able to join us. I think this is really, really exciting. I'm very excited to see how you guys continue to change this coming year as well. And we'll have to circle back and get an update then too.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely.